On a silent rural road where nothing ever seemed to happen, a young woman disappeared as if the earth itself had swallowed her whole. No cries cut through the air. No struggle marked the ground. Only absence remained. On a quiet morning in September 1988, Tara Calico set out on a routine bike ride along a familiar stretch of highway in New Mexico. It was a habit she followed often, a peaceful ritual that brought her clarity and strength. But this time, she never returned home. Later, investigators discovered only a shattered cassette tape along the roadside, a silent trace of a routine morning that never ended. What happened to Tara Calico remains one of America's most haunting unsolved disappearances, suspended between evidence and uncertainty. Tonight, we step into a mystery frozen in time, shaped by strange clues, unsettling images, and questions that continue to echo without answers. Belen, New Mexico, was a place where time seemed to slow down. The town rested quietly along long stretches of desert roads, surrounded by open land and endless skies. Mornings were calm, with the sound of distant traffic fading into silence. Neighbors greeted one another by name. Children played freely outside. There were few serious crimes, and danger felt like something that existed far beyond the borders of this peaceful community. For generations, families had lived side by side, sharing routines and traditions. People trusted one another instinctively. Doors were rarely locked during the day. Parents felt safe letting their children walk or ride bikes without supervision. The rural highways surrounding Belen were seen not as threats, but as peaceful paths connecting everyday life. There was a deep sense of security rooted in familiarity. Everyone knew who belonged and who did not. Strangers stood out quickly, but serious trouble almost never followed. This created a collective belief that Belen was protected by its simplicity. It was the kind of place where tragedy felt impossible, until the day it quietly arrived. Within this calm environment lived Tara Calico, a 19-year-old college student full of energy and ambition. Tara was known for her bright smile, sharp mind, and warm personality. She was the kind of young woman who balanced responsibility with joy, working hard at school while staying active and social. Tara loved sports and physical activity. Cycling became her favorite routine, especially in the mornings when the air was cool and the roads were empty. Riding gave her a sense of freedom and peace. It allowed her to clear her thoughts and feel strong in both body and mind. Academically, Tara was doing well. She had plans for the future that reflected her caring nature. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, someone who could guide children and shape lives in positive ways. Friends often described her as compassionate and patient, the type of person who naturally helped others feel comfortable and understood. More than anything, Tara was deeply connected to her family, especially her mother, Patty Calico. Their relationship was close and affectionate. Patty had raised Tara with love and attention, always encouraging her goals while quietly worrying about her safety. Patty was protective but not controlling. She trusted Tara's independence, yet she understood that the world was not always as gentle as their town appeared. Over time, she had expressed concerns about the isolated roads Tara rode along each morning. She sometimes suggested that Tara carry some form of self-defense, like pepper spray, just in case. The desert highways were long and empty. If something happened, help would not arrive quickly. Tara usually brushed off these worries with confidence. She had ridden those roads for years without incident. Nothing dangerous had ever occurred. To her, the rides were as normal as walking to class or meeting friends. The town felt safe, and the routine felt harmless. Beyond her family, Tara had a close circle of friends who admired her strength and positivity. She was social but grounded, enjoying simple gatherings rather than reckless behavior. Her life reflected stability, not risk. There were no signs of emotional struggles or desires to escape her world, yet beneath the peaceful surface of Belen, subtle tensions existed. Like many small towns, there were groups of local teenagers who spent time driving around in pickup trucks, often along the rural highways. Some residents whispered about their reckless behavior. Stories circulated of them shouting at pedestrians or cyclists, sometimes swerving too close for comfort. It was often dismissed as youthful immaturity rather than genuine danger. No one believed these behaviors would ever turn dangerous. In a town where serious crime was rare, such actions felt harmless and easily dismissed. Yet the environment carried quiet risks. The roads Tara traveled were scenic but isolated, with long stretches without houses or traffic. psychologically. Places like this create a false sense of safety, where familiarity convinces people that danger simply cannot exist. His collective calm allowed routines to continue without caution. It allowed Tara to ride alone, with headphones on, disconnected from the world around her. It allowed people to overlook small warning signs, because nothing terrible had ever followed before. From a philosophical perspective, this mirrors the Buddhist concept of attachment to stability. When humans cling to the belief that life will remain safe and predictable, suffering often emerges when reality breaks that illusion. Western psychology also recognizes this pattern as normalcy bias. People underestimate risks because their past experiences have been peaceful. The mind assumes the future will resemble the past. Balan existed inside this psychological bias, where peace slowly transformed into assumption. The town believed deeply in its own safety, trusting that nothing truly bad could happen within its familiar boundaries. Tara believed in her daily routine, seeing each morning ride as harmless and comforting. Patty's quiet worries lived at the edge of this belief, present but never strong enough to interrupt the rhythm of normal life. In Christian thought, peace is often viewed as a blessing, yet Scripture consistently warns against complacency, reminding believers that danger can emerge when vigilance fades. No one in Balan was prepared for how quickly their calm world would change. The peaceful roads that once symbolized freedom would soon become symbols of mystery and fear, and the bright young life that filled homes with laughter would soon become a question without an answer. Everything about Tara's world seemed stable, safe, and ordinary, which is often exactly how tragedy begins. The most terrifying crimes rarely unfold in places filled with chaos. They often arise in environments where everyone feels secure, where danger is unimagined, and where routine replaces caution. They happen quietly, suddenly, and when no one is expecting them at all. The morning of September 20th, 1988, unfolded with the same gentle rhythm that shaped most days in the small town of Balan. The desert sky glowed softly as the sun rose higher, casting warm light across the long empty roads, stretching toward the horizon. Inside the Calico home, nothing felt unusual or tense. Tara moved calmly through her routine, preparing for the bike ride she had taken countless times before. It was a habit built on comfort, familiarity, and a quiet sense of independence that made the early hours feel peaceful rather than dangerous, as she always did. Tara picked up her cassette player and placed the headphones over her ears. Music accompanied her on every ride, creating a private world where worries faded and thoughts flowed freely. The wide highways became a kind of sanctuary, where the steady rhythm of pedaling matched the steady rhythm of her breathing. For Tara, these rides were moments of clarity and strength, never something to fear. The open landscape felt like freedom rather than isolation. Before she left, Patty gently repeated the concern she often carried in her heart. She reminded Tara of the long, empty stretches of road and suggested she'd bring pepper spray, just to be safe. It was not spoken with panic, but with the quiet instinct of a mother who understood how unpredictable life could be. The emptiness of the highway worried her, even if nothing bad had ever happened before. Tara listened patiently, smiled, and reassured her mother that everything would be fine. The town was safe, the roads were familiar, and years of peaceful rides had built strong confidence that danger simply did not exist there. Tara then stepped outside, mounted her bicycle, and headed toward Highway 47. The road ahead was calm and nearly empty, bordered by dry grass and open land shimmering in the early sunlight. Few cars passed that morning, and the world felt slow and quiet. Several witnesses later recalled seeing Tara riding steadily with her headphones on, her movements relaxed and natural. She appeared focused and peaceful, like any young woman enjoying a routine morning exercise, showing no sign of distress or hesitation. Not long after, a pickup truck was seen traveling behind Tara. At first, nothing seemed unusual, since trucks were common along that road, and many locals drove them daily. However, the vehicle did not pass her as expected. Instead, it remained close, matching her speed and keeping an uncomfortably short distance. One witness later recalled feeling uneasy as the truck continued to follow her without overtaking, lingering far longer than normal traffic behavior. In criminal psychology, such behavior is often described as boundary testing, where a predator studies vulnerability while maintaining the appearance of normal movement. It creates silent pressure before action occurs. Around 9:30 that morning, Tara was last seen riding along Highway 47 with the truck still behind her. After that, there were no more witnesses, and the familiar road fell back into silence. When noon passed and Tara still had not returned, Patty's worry shifted into a deep, unsettling fear. Tara was always careful with time, especially after her morning rides. She never disappeared without calling or explaining a delay. Each passing minute felt heavier, and a quiet instinct told Patty that this was not an ordinary change of plans, but something far more serious. Patty drove along Tara's usual route, scanning both sides of Highway 47 with growing desperation. She searched for the familiar bicycle, the bright helmet, or any sign that Tara had stopped or needed help. She slowed near intersections and empty fields, asking neighbors and passing drivers if they had seen her daughter. Every negative response tightened the knot in her chest. Soon after, police were notified and the case quickly became urgent. Officers collected witness statements, including reports of a pickup truck following Tara earlier that morning. Patrol cars searched along the highway while others walked the roadside, checking bushes, ditches, and open land. Helicopters scanned the desert from above as trained dogs tracked her scent. The trail appeared strong near the road and then suddenly stopped, suggesting Tara had been taken into a vehicle during a fast and controlled incident. Soon, investigators discovered the first physical clues along the roadside. A broken cassette tape lay scattered, its cracked casing and tangled tape suggesting force rather than an accidental drop. Nearby, small plastic fragments believed to be from Tara's bicycle were found. Together, these objects pointed to sudden chaos followed by total absence. There was no bicycle, no clothing, and no clear direction to follow. Psychologically, scenes like this often indicate a rapid abduction or violent encounter with immediate removal, suggesting whatever happened unfolded quickly and with control. For the town of Belen, the realization was deeply unsettling. The quiet roads that once symbolized comfort and routine had suddenly become the center of fear. Neighbors gathered in hushed groups, sharing worries and speculation. Parents became more cautious, watching their children closely. The long-held belief that nothing truly dangerous could happen there was shattered within hours, replaced by uncertainty and unease that spread through the small community. For Patty Calico, the pain was unbearable. Just that morning, she had watched her daughter ride away as she always did, confident and full of life. Now there was only silence where Tara should have been. Broken pieces of a cassette tape and fragments of a bicycle were all that remained. Small objects carrying an overwhelming sense of loss, the absence felt louder than any sound. The cruel reality soon became clear. Tara had not simply gone missing. She had vanished without explanation. In broad daylight, along a familiar road, she disappeared without a trace. From that moment forward, the case would grow into a haunting mystery, stretching across decades, filled with theories, fragile clues, and questions that would never easily fade. In the hours following Tara's disappearance, local law enforcement moved quickly, aware that time was the most critical factor in finding a missing person. Officers coordinated one of the largest search efforts the town of Belen had ever seen. Patrol cars lined the highways, volunteers spread across open fields, and search teams walked mile after mile of desert terrain, hoping to uncover any sign of Tara or her bicycle. Helicopters hovered above the landscape, scanning the ground from the air while trained dogs attempted to follow Tara's scent along the roadside. For a brief time, the trail seemed promising, leading investigators back and forth along Highway 47. Then, without warning, the scent abruptly stopped, as though Tara had been lifted from the ground and carried away. This sudden end reinforced the theory that a vehicle had been involved. If Tara had fallen or wandered off, some trace would likely have remained. Instead, the desert offered nothing. No bicycle hidden in the brush, no footprints leading into the fields, no sign of struggle beyond the broken cassette tape and scattered plastic fragments already found. Days passed with no breakthroughs. The massive search yielded nothing but exhaustion and growing fear. The physical emptiness of the landscape mirrored the emptiness of evidence. For investigators, it was one of the most frustrating scenarios possible. A crime scene without a scene, a disappearance without direction, as hope for a quick resolution faded. National media outlets began covering the story. Tara Calico's face appeared on television screens across the country. Newspapers ran headlines about the young college student who vanished during a routine bike ride in broad daylight. The peaceful image of Belen now stood in sharp contrast to the terrifying mystery unfolding within it. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Communities far beyond New Mexico expressed shock that something so frightening could happen in such a quiet place. Many believed Tara had been abducted by a stranger, pulled into a vehicle and taken far away before anyone could notice. Rumors spread rapidly. Some claimed they had seen suspicious vehicles in the area. Others spoke about strangers passing through. Town fear grew alongside speculation, and with fear came countless theories, most unsupported by evidence but fueled by anxiety and imagination. Within Belen itself, attention soon turned toward familiar faces rather than unknown outsiders. Several residents recalled the local group of teenage boys who often drove pickup trucks along the rural roads, sometimes harassing cyclists for fun. Their reckless behavior, once dismissed as harmless, now felt more sinister in light of Tara's disappearance. Police questioned several of these young men, focusing particularly on those known to frequent Highway 47. Some admitted to following cyclists in the past, laughing or shouting as they passed by. Others denied any involvement entirely. Their stories never fully aligned. Small differences appeared in timelines and descriptions of where they had been. That morning, none of the contradictions were strong enough to prove involvement, yet they created lingering doubt. There was no physical evidence linking them to Tara, no witnesses who saw a confrontation, and no confession to confirm suspicion. Without solid proof, investigators were left balancing uncertainty and intuition. From a psychological perspective, group dynamics often complicate criminal cases. When multiple young people are questioned, fear and loyalty can shape their responses. Some may change details to protect friends, while others may lie simply out of panic. Even innocent individuals can offer inconsistent statements under pressure. These patterns make truth difficult to separate from confusion, especially in communities where everyone knows one another. Despite continued questioning, the teenage suspects remained only that, suspects without evidence. Weeks passed, then months, and public attention slowly faded. Search efforts lost momentum, and the case began to cool. What once felt urgent now drifted into uncertainty, joining countless other missing person files waiting for a breakthrough that might never come. Then, nearly a year later, a shocking discovery reignited national attention. In June of 1989, a woman in Florida found a Polaroid photograph lying in a parking lot. It appeared to have fallen from a vehicle, possibly dropped by accident. The image was disturbing and immediately turned over to authorities, who recognized its potential connection to Tara's disappearance. The photograph showed two young people inside what appeared to be a large enclosed van or truck. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and their mouths were covered, suggesting captivity. The space looked dark and confined, with limited light revealing their frightened faces. One was a teenage boy, the other was a young woman who strongly resembled Tara Calico. When Patty Calico saw the image, she felt certain the girl was her daughter. The facial structure, hair, and expression seemed unmistakable. For her, it was not speculation, but recognition. Some forensic experts agreed the resemblance was compelling, while others urged caution, pointing out the poor image quality and lighting that made confirmation difficult, even without certainty. The photograph changed everything. If the girl was Tara, it meant she had survived for months after disappearing. It suggested her case might not be a local incident, but part of a broader pattern of abductions. The large vehicle implied long-distance travel, fit in known behavior of mobile predators during the 1980s, who crossed state lines to avoid detection. For Tara's family, the image brought hope mixed with unbearable fear. For investigators, it opened new paths, yet offered no clear answers. The photographer was never identified, no fingerprints were recovered, no vehicle was traced. The search expanded beyond New Mexico, but every lead faded into uncertainty. The case became a maze of dead ends, haunted by a single photograph that refused to explain itself. During the 1980s, the United States saw a troubling rise in child abductions and unexplained disappearances. Many of these cases were eventually connected to offenders who traveled across state lines, using highways as invisible pathways to move victims far from where they were taken. This mobility confused investigations and delayed responses, often leaving families without answers, while authorities struggled to track criminals who never stayed in one place. Criminal profiling from that era revealed a disturbing pattern. Certain predators preferred remote roads and small communities where witnesses were few and police resources were limited. These areas allowed abductions to happen quickly and quietly. Victims could be taken within minutes and transported long distances before anyone realized something was wrong. This reality soon shaped theories surrounding Calico's disappearance. The mysterious Polaroid photograph discovered in Florida appeared to fit this pattern almost too perfectly. The large enclosed vehicle suggested movement and concealment. The confined space implied captivity. The distance from New Mexico raised the possibility that Tara had been transported far from her hometown shortly after vanishing. What once seemed like a local mystery suddenly hinted at something much larger. The way the photograph surfaced made it even more unsettling. It was not handed directly to police or mailed anonymously. Instead, it appeared randomly in a parking lot, as if dropped accidentally from a moving vehicle. This strange detail fueled speculation about the person who took the picture and how it ended up abandoned in public. Investigators questioned whether the photographer was involved in the crime or simply stumbled upon something horrifying. Some believed the image could have been taken by an accomplice, or even one of the abductors themselves, possibly kept as a twisted souvenir. Others thought it might have belonged to someone who witnessed captivity without fully understanding what they saw. The photograph offered no helpful context. There was no date, no recognizable landmarks, and no visible license plate. Nothing indicated where or when it was taken. It existed as a frozen moment of fear, disconnected from any known location. This made it impossible to trace and turned it into a haunting symbol rather than solid evidence. Despite the uncertainty, the tension focused heavily on the young woman in the image. Many who knew Tara felt the resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of her face, the long dark hair, and the expression in her eyes seemed painfully familiar. To family and friends, it looked like a captured moment of Tara's life after her disappearance. Patty Calico remained firmly convinced the girl was her daughter. She pointed out specific features that only a mother might recognize, such as the curve of the nose and the position of the eyebrows. For her, it was not speculation, it was recognition. Her certainty was driven by instinct rather than science, but it never faded. Law enforcement experts, however, were divided. Some forensic analysts compared facial measurements and suggested the resemblance was possible. Others warned that emotional attachment could influence perception, especially in traumatic cases. The poor quality of the photograph made confirmation difficult. Without clear resolution, authorities could not officially identify the girl as Tara. Years later, another discovery strengthened the photograph's credibility in a disturbing way. Investigators concluded that the teenage boy in the image was likely a known kidnapping victim from a separate case. His identity matched a young person who had disappeared under similar circumstances around the same time period. This revelation changed how the photograph was viewed. If the boy had truly been a confirmed victim, then the image was almost certainly real. It was not staged or fictional. It captured actual captivity. And if one person in the photo had been abducted, the possibility that the girl was Tara suddenly felt far more believable. The case shifted from a local tragedy to a potential link in a larger chain of crimes. Investigators began re-examining connections to other disappearances across the country. The theory of a traveling predator gained renewed attention, suggesting Tara's fate might be tied to offenders who operated far beyond New Mexico. Psychological profiling of Tara further supported the abduction theory. She was described as responsible, cautious, and deeply attached to her family. She had future plans and strong routines. There were no signs of emotional distress or desire to run away. Everything pointed toward her life being interrupted by force, not choice. The broken cassette tape and plastic fragments near the roadside took on new meaning. They suggested sudden movement and possible struggle, as if Tara had been forced away from her bicycle quickly. These small clues aligned with the image of a rapid abduction, reinforcing the belief that she had been taken by vehicle. The Polaroid photograph became both the strongest hope and the deepest frustration of the case. It hinted that Tara may have survived beyond the day she vanished, yet it offered no concrete answers. No suspects were identified. No locations were confirmed. It remained a haunting window into the unknown. For decades, the image circulated among investigators and the public, sparking renewed hope each time it resurfaced. Some experts dismissed the resemblance as coincidence, while others insisted too many details aligned to ignore. The debate continues, frozen in uncertainty. What could no longer be denied was that identifying the boy as another confirmed victim changed the photograph forever. It was no longer a rumor or strange coincidence, but a real glimpse into captivity. The image now suggested organized movement, hidden confinement, and the presence of a broader pattern of abductions operating beyond one town. The photograph became a haunting symbol of unanswered questions, holding the promise of truth while never fully revealing it, leaving Calico's fate suspended between hope and mystery. As years passed without concrete answers, investigators and the public gradually narrowed the mystery of Calico's disappearance into three primary theories. Each offered a different explanation, shaped by witness accounts, physical fragments, and psychological patterns observed in similar cases. None could be fully proven, yet each carried a chilling sense of possibility that kept the case alive. The first theory focused on a personal motive rooted within the local community itself. Several residents had long whispered about a group of young men who regularly drove pickup trucks along Highway 47. These individuals were known for harassing cyclists and speeding dangerously close to people on the roadside. Some witnesses recalled seeing a truck following Tara closely on the morning she vanished. The behavior seemed playful at first, like reckless teasing, but it may have escalated into something far more serious. Investigators considered the possibility that the young men accidentally struck Tara with their vehicle. In this version of events, panic would have quickly taken control. A serious injury or accidental death may have led to a rushed decision to hide the body and remove evidence. Fear of prison, shame, and ruined futures in a small town could have forced those involved into silence. Later, rumors spread that some young men had hinted they knew the truth while drinking. Though nothing was confirmed, supporters believed this matched witness reports of the truck and the broken plastic fragments near the road. However, the major weakness of this explanation remained the absence of physical evidence. No body was ever found. No blood, clothing, or personal belongings beyond the cassette tape were recovered. Without tangible proof, the theory remained rooted largely in speculation and rumor. The second theory centered on the idea of a staged accident. This version suggested that Tara may have been struck by a vehicle, whether intentionally or accidentally, and that the driver or drivers then deliberately removed her body from the scene. Unlike the first theory, this scenario did not require a group of local teenagers to be involved. It could have been a single driver passing through the area, someone who caused an accident and panicked, fearing arrest, public shame, and lifelong consequences. That person may have chosen to conceal the incident instead of seeking help. Supporters believed this scenario best explained the broken cassette tape and plastic debris. These items suggested a sudden violent disruption consistent with a collision. If Tara's bike had been hit, the impact could have scattered pieces across the roadside before everything else was cleaned up. The idea of a hurried cleanup also fit with the lack of additional evidence. A driver with enough time and fear could have removed the bicycle, the body, and any visible traces before anyone noticed. Yet this explanation faced a serious flaw. No remains were ever found. In many hidden body cases, time eventually reveals the truth through construction, animals, or accidental discovery. The complete absence of Tara's body caused many investigators to doubt that a simple accident, followed by concealment, could explain everything. Without physical proof, the theory remained possible but increasingly difficult to support. The third and most chilling theory pointed toward a traveling predator. This idea closely matched the mysterious Polaroid photograph and the wave of interstate abductions during the 1980s. Criminals often targeted isolated roads, quickly forcing victims into vehicles and transporting them far away. Highway 47 offered the perfect conditions with its open spaces, few witnesses, and easy access to major routes. Within this scenario, the broken cassette tape symbolized the sudden moment of capture. The scattered plastic fragments may have come from Tara's bicycle being knocked aside during a struggle. If the Polaroid truly showed her alive months later, it would strongly support the theory of long-distance abduction. A mobile offender could explain why Tara vanished completely without leaving behind clear local evidence. Supporters of this view pointed to many similar cases where victims were taken hundreds of miles from where they disappeared. Some were later found in distant states, while others were never recovered at all. This pattern made Tara's total disappearance seem consistent with predator behavior seen across the country during that time. However, this theory also carried major uncertainty. The photograph could never be officially confirmed as Tara. No known abductors were linked directly to her case. No forensic evidence tied her disappearance to other crimes. While emotionally powerful, the explanation remained built on possibility rather than proof. Each theory reflected different aspects of human psychology. The local group theory showed how fear and shared guilt can push people into silence, especially in small communities where reputations and relationships are tightly connected. Social psychology often demonstrates how groups protect themselves when facing collective consequences. The accident concealment theory represented self-preservation, overpowering morality. History is filled with cases where individuals hide tragic mistakes rather than face punishment. Panic can drive people to extreme decisions, even when the truth might eventually surface. The traveling predator theory aligned with known criminal patterns, where routine, isolation, and vulnerability create opportunity. Predators often seek moments when victims are alone and environments offer quick escape routes. Tara's daily bike rides fit this tragic vulnerability. None of these explanations could be completely dismissed, yet none could be proven. Over time, the case became a reflection of uncertainty itself. Some believed the truth was hidden close to home. Others were convinced she was taken far away. Still others leaned toward a tragic accident. And so, the mystery continues. Was Tara Calico lost to a local tragedy, a hidden mistake, or a predator who vanished into the endless highways? Each theory tells a different story of fear, choice, and human behavior, and without answers, all remain possible. From a psychological standpoint, Tara Calico's disappearance aligns closely with patterns seen in opportunistic predatory crimes. These offenders do not always plan specific victims in advance, but instead look for moments of vulnerability. Isolated roads, predictable routines, and limited witnesses create ideal conditions. A lone cyclist on a quiet highway becomes an easy target. The predator acts quickly, driven by impulse mixed with practiced control, leaving behind little evidence and maximum confusion for investigators. Research into violent offenders shows that many such predators rely on geography as much as strategy. Remote areas allow them to operate with minimal risk. Highways offer escape routes in multiple directions. This combination has historically enabled abductors to move victims across long distances before anyone realizes a crime has occurred. Tara's routine morning rides, though harmless in intention, unknowingly placed her within a pattern these criminals often exploit. At the same time, psychology also offers insight into scenarios involving accidents and collective silence. When people face sudden tragedy caused by their own actions, especially in groups, panic can override moral judgment. Studies on group behavior reveal that shared guilt often leads to mutual protection. Fear of prison, social shame, and destroying families can push individuals into long-term secrecy, even when the emotional burden becomes unbearable. This phenomenon is known as collective concealment, where each participant remains silent because speaking would implicate everyone. Over time, the secret becomes heavier, but breaking it feels impossible. If Tara's disappearance resulted from an accident involving locals, this psychological pressure could explain why no one ever came forward, despite years of investigation and public attention. Beyond psychology, philosophy and religion offer deeper reflections on why such tragedies resonate so powerfully. In Buddhist thought, the concept of impermanence teaches that everything we believe to be stable is constantly changing. Suffering often arises from attachment to safety and routine. Tara's story embodies this lesson painfully, showing how a normal day can suddenly transform into irreversible loss. From this perspective, the shock comes not only from the crime itself, but from the illusion of control humans hold over daily life. The peaceful road, the familiar routine, and the sense of security all represented attachments that were shattered in an instant. The disappearance becomes a reminder that life's stability is far more fragile than we prefer to believe. Western philosophy often explores the idea of random evil existing within ordinary life. Thinkers such as Hannah Arendt described how harm does not always come from monstrous figures, but from everyday circumstances and ordinary people making destructive choices. Tara's case reflects this unsettling truth. Whether through accident, silence, or predation, the event may not have required elaborate planning, only opportunity and human weakness. Christian theology adds another layer by focusing on guilt and unconfessed wrongdoing. The belief holds that hidden sins weigh heavily on the soul, shaping lives through internal torment. If Tara's disappearance involved people who chose silence, this burden may have followed them for decades, influencing behavior, relationships, and even health. Unspoken truth becomes its own form of punishment. These philosophical views do not solve the mystery, but they help explain why the case feels so haunting. It touches fundamental fears about safety, randomness, and the capacity for darkness within normal life. It forces us to confront how easily tragedy can emerge without warning or clear villains. In recent years, advances in investigative technology have reopened hope for answers. Modern DNA testing can analyze tiny fragments that were once considered useless. Old evidence, preserved for decades, can now be examined with far greater precision. Cold cases across the country have been solved using these methods. Sometimes after 30 or 40 years of silence, authorities have also begun re-examining old witness statements with fresh eyes. Human memory changes over time, but so does willingness to speak. People who were once afraid may now feel less threatened. Guilt, aging, and a desire for closure can motivate long-silent witnesses to finally share what they know. Some investigators believe the truth about Calico still exists within the community or hidden within overlooked evidence. It may not require new crimes to be discovered, only the courage to revisit the past honestly. Every cold case that is solved reinforces the possibility that Tara's story could someday reach resolution. Yet, uncertainty remains the dominant reality surrounding Calico's disappearance. Some believe the truth lies hidden within the quiet boundaries of a small town, buried beneath fear, guilt, and years of silence. In this view, panic may have driven people to protect themselves rather than come forward, allowing a tragic event to fade into rumor and unresolved whispers. The lack of physical evidence, however, continues to challenge this explanation, leaving many questions unanswered. Others are convinced Tara was taken by a predator who used the vast American highway system as an escape route. This theory points to calculated behavior, isolation, and the haunting possibility of long-distance captivity. It reflects a darker side of human nature, where opportunity meets cruelty. Both scenarios reveal different psychological realities, and both remain possible, keeping the mystery painfully alive. Perhaps the most disturbing part of Tara's disappearance is not only what happened to her, but how easily it could happen to anyone. It reminds us that danger does not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it arrives quietly, on an ordinary morning, along a familiar road, and leaves behind nothing but fragments and unanswered questions. The disappearance of Calico has become a lasting symbol of how quickly ordinary life can turn into tragedy. It reflects the fragility of safety, the power of fear, and the many unanswered questions that surround human behavior. Until clear evidence finally reveals what truly happened, her case remains a haunting mystery, shaped by both the limited clues and the endless search for understanding. More than 3 decades have passed since Calico disappeared along that quiet stretch of road in New Mexico, yet time has brought no clear answers. No body was ever recovered, and no one was ever charged. What remains are fragments of a life interrupted in clues that seem forever suspended between truth and speculation. A broken cassette tape, fading memories, and a haunting photograph continue to whisper possibilities without ever revealing certainty. Her case reminds us how quickly the ordinary can collapse into mystery. Tara's story is not only about one young woman who vanished, but about the silence that often follows unresolved crime. It speaks to fear, guilt, chance, and the fragile illusion of safety. If you believe cold cases deserve justice and voices that refuse to fade, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of the criminal mind. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Mind.